Hello, everyone. So, I haven't done a video for a while, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to get some information out to you guys in a way that I think maybe writing is a little bit unhelpful. So, this is very confusing. I wanted to talk to you guys about the Fair Labor Standards Act turnover of the increase that was supposed to happen in January, and then we can also talk about the increase that happened in July. So, um, what is going on is that, as you know, or should know, which a lot of organizations are doing incorrectly, whether an employee is a salaried employee or an hourly employee or exempt versus non exempt, they need to not only meet the duties clause of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is quite honestly the most important piece, but they also need to be able to meet the salary component of it as well. And so I do see often when I go into organizations that they are meeting this salary piece, but not necessarily the duties piece. And so we have to make some changes and put them into an hourly role or a non-exempt salary. But that's another conversation. If you have questions about that, reach out to me on your own. But in July, the minimum, or going into July, the minimum was right around 35,000, 34,000 and some change. And so there were some employees that were salaried positions or exempt positions that employers had to either give them an increase to the new wage, which is right around $44,000, and or decide to make them hourly or non-exempt salary where you're tracking their time to make sure that they're getting paid overtime for any hours that they're working over 40. So that's where the exemption is coming in, as they are exempt from overtime provisions. So that happened in July 1st. And I wasn't super surprised that that went through, quite honestly, but there was one state that decided to file an appeal, and that, of course, was Texas, which it almost always is. Every time something is trying to be overturned, that's usually the state that it's coming from. However, they didn't really hear a lot from any other states at that point, and so they were like, well, it sounds like Texas has a problem, but we're just going to keep trucking away. And so it was appealed, but it wasn't getting a ton of attention. However, what ended up happening was on July 1st of 2025, there was supposed to be another increase, and this increase was pretty substantial. It's going from 44,000. Not that the other one wasn't substantial, because it was 35 to 44, but now it would be going from 44 to around 59. And that's a pretty, 35 to 59,000 in like less than 6 months is a huge increase and a huge burden on organizations that have, these exempt employees, or are going to now have to put people on hourly and start paying them overtime for any hours over 40. So there is a lot of, balancing going on there. But a lot more states jumped on board. And so what ended up happening was they ended up basically appealing, or holding up the appeal and saying that the Department of Labor doesn't necessarily have the authority to change the salary. The argument was that, the duties are really what we need to look at the most from a determination of exempt versus non-exempt. It really comes down to the duties. It doesn't necessarily come down to like how much money people are making. And they didn't want the money piece to be the driver of whether an employee is salaried or exempt versus non-exempt. And so this is the same thing that happened in 2016. So I don't know if any of you guys remember this, but in 2016, there was the same kind of thing that was going on. This was under the Biden administration. And literally days before the change was supposed to happen, they decided that they were going to pull the plug on it for the same exact reason, that the Department of Labor is really exceeds their authority, and also it's kind of putting the salary on the forefront versus the duties, which is the piece that really is the most important. And so that's what happened in this administration. Now, obviously, there's more appeals that are going on, and there's courts that are going to, the courts are going to have to listen to this, and it's going to have to kind of run its course. But that being said, we also have a new administration coming in January. And so if we look back at what Trump did after the Biden administration, when all of these increases were kind of going through or trying to go through, it basically was stopped. Like there really wasn't a ton of conversations that happened once Trump took the presidency. And so I would anticipate that that's probably going to happen again. I think ultimately this really comes down to like the Fair Labor Standards Act is really about the duties and not necessarily about the salary. And I don't know that it's going to gain much traction under the Trump administration. And so it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Now, if you gave your employees increases on July 1st, what I would suggest you do is I would suggest you leave them exactly where they're at. However, if you did decide to make your employees hourly, you are able to put them back into salary as long as the duties truly meet the Fair Labor Standards Act duty test, which I think is the caveat here that I really see in organizations often. They have salaried employees or exempt employees that really aren't exempt employees. And I would say probably 50% of the organizations that I go into, probably even more than that, have people in salaried positions that absolutely should not be exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act or overtime provisions. So I would suggest that if you are going to move people back into a salaried position, you have someone like me look at the duties and tell you if the job is actually a salaried position based on the duties outlined in the Fair Labor Standards Act. If you, I also would suggest maybe not moving them back, only because I think from a morale and engagement perspective, it's probably not the greatest move. Culture perspective as well. I think it's probably best to just leave it where it was. But obviously you can move them back to exempt if it is in fact an exempt position. And then as far as the new increase goes, or the increase that was really the one that got the attention of the courts again, I would say that I would probably just wait and see what happens, because the like I said, the Trump administration is probably not going to do much with this. So I would not put a ton of effort into it. So just wanted to update you on that. If you have any questions about it, I know this stuff is all super confusing. It makes sense to me because I live in this world every day. But I can totally understand how someone who's not working with this all the time would be really confused about what this even means. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them, or you can also drop them in the comment section, and I'm happy to answer them for anyone that might have questions. So have a great day and stay out of trouble out there.